Good morning, Liberty. We are live. It is Friday morning, December the 21st, 2018. My name is Michael Boldin, broadcasting to you from here in my home office and studio, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, here on the West Coast in downtown Los Angeles. So good morning to you, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be tuning in, whether it's through here live on YouTube or in the archives here or elsewhere, Brighteon, BitChute, Twitter, Facebook, Minds.com, or on our podcast feeds through iTunes, Google, or Spotify. It doesn't matter where you're watching, where you're listening. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today. It's going to be a little quicker show. I want to just kind of, first of all, say Merry Christmas. I know a lot of people are traveling today with Christmas and Christmas Eve being Monday and Tuesday, or Tuesday and Monday, I guess, technically. So people are traveling. I know there's some bad weather on the East Coast. So wherever you are, I hope you're enjoying yourself and you're spending some time with loved ones, family, friends, whatever that may be, and that you're safe in your travels. Personally, I'm staying here in frigid, cold Southern California, where we're barely going to hit 70 degrees today, so I'm really going to have to bundle up. But I'm going to spend some time with my lovely Sarah Rosa and some good friends. My family is mostly back east in Wisconsin or on the East Coast. My sister lives in Boston, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of phone calls, maybe some Skype calls and things like that with family. But I hope you're going to have a wonderful Christmas with whoever you spend time with. So out in the live chat, I want to say hi to States Rights Gist, Larry Clark and everyone else, Joseph Standridge, good morning, and of course, Merry Christmas again. Today I want to talk about a really interesting history piece. There's a lot of things I still need to cover. I know I mentioned in recent shows that I want to cover asset forfeiture. We also need to do an episode on some of the latest legislation. We've got a lot of constitutional carry bills introduced. We're starting to get some bills on stingray surveillance. Another one that's going to be reported on next week in Missouri that is very similar to what passed in Michigan this year to ban resources or material support for warrantless federal surveillance. So basically, turn off everything that associates with the with mass NSA spying or other federal spying programs. Hi to Denver Libertarian out in the chat as well. And so we got to cover a lot of that. I am going to take at least one day off this next week from my normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. Probably at least Monday. I'm assuming also on Wednesday. I figure I'm going to be tired from eating a little bit too much on Christmas Day. So I'll probably be off on Monday and Wednesday. It's possible I'll do a Wednesday show, but I'll make sure I try to set a reminder on the live dashboard here through YouTube to let you know when the next episode is going to be. Most likely it won't be till next week, Friday. But I will update you guys. If not, I'll try to have some other type of video that you guys can watch, one of our short educational ones that we post every 1 to 2 weeks. Also, hi to EHP Training. And of course, again, Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you have some wonderful plans coming up. But let's get into this conversation I wanted to have today, which is about this, what I see is, and I don't know if it was intentional, but a Christmas gift from James Madison and, of course, his friend Thomas Jefferson, too. And that is the Virginia Resolutions of 1798. We ran an article today. We've got the links in the show notes. This, of course, is just the text of the Resolutions of 1798, which passed on both December 21st, so today is the anniversary of the House of Delegates passing it, and then the 24th, on Christmas Eve, it passed the Virginia Senate in concurrence. So we've got a link to that, and some of the text is really very interesting in its opposition to the Alien and Sedition Acts. But we also published an article that I titled, this was from Mike Meharry, my good friend and a great writer and researcher, A Christmas Gift from James Madison, the Virginia Resolutions of 1798. You can see that in the show notes on YouTube. We also publish all of our show notes and archives over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. These will be there once we're done with the live show. So Mike put together a really nice kind of history, a backgrounder to explain what happened there, what it's all about, the significance, and the strategy. He also did a similar one that we sent out to our email subscribers on November 10th. Remember the 10th of November. That's when Jefferson's resolutions passed in Kentucky. So here's how he started out the article. Resolutions drafted by James Madison and passed by Virginia on December 21st and 24th, 1798, answer a timeless question. What do we do when the federal government oversteps its constitutional bounds? I mean, do we sue the federal government in federal court in the hopes that the federal judges will tell the other federal branches to limit their own power? Do we vote the bums out in the hopes that the new bums are going to just say, oh, I don't want that federal power? Do we march on D.C. and say, please stop using all this federal power? Well, Madison and Jefferson both told us in these resolutions and at that time that if you relied on the federal government to determine the extent of its own powers, you shouldn't be surprised that that power would always grow and grow and grow. And in general, that's been the strategic approach of everybody for ages. Sue them in the federal courts, vote the bums out, protest in D.C., go to the National Mall, whatever. In other words, asking the federal government to limit itself. But they both taught us, Jefferson and Madison, and many others actually, taught us that this is not how you approach things. This is not how to deal with the federal government, is asking it to limit itself. This is a bad strategy. So in response to what Congress passed and signed by John Adams, in the summer of 1798, 4 acts known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. These were extreme levels of power taken by the federal government, executive power, and attacks on free speech. Short version on that. You can Google the Alien and Sedition Acts if you want to look into it further. But how do you deal with it? Were people like Jefferson and Madison going to just sit there and try to sue? No. They wanted to take a different approach. So they started communicating about this. And Jefferson, who was the sitting vice president at the time, mind you, sitting vice president, working with states to undermine federal power, drafted resolutions in November of 1798 that were passed in November. And they were signed by Governor Girard on November 16th of that year. So Jefferson took a draft of those resolutions as passed and sent them in a letter to James Madison. And he wrote this. I thought this was really good. I enclose you a copy of the draft of the Kentucky Resolves. I think we should distinctly affirm all the important principles they contain, so as to hold to that ground in the future, and leave the matter in such a train as that we may not be committed absolutely to push the matter to extremities, and yet may be free to push as far as events will render prudent. Short version, Jefferson's eloquent text, is let's make sure that we always talk about our ultimate principles. And then let's look at the events of the day and take a step-by-step approach and push things as far as we can under consideration, but never hold back on our ultimate principles of what our liberty, what we're trying to achieve. And this is a very good 1-2 punch. Hold the principles and then recognize you're not going to get from point A to point B or point A to point Z in one step. And I gave a speech at PorcFest, the 10th anniversary of the Porcupine Freedom Fest in New Hampshire, basically talked about getting from zero to Rothbard. You don't get there in one step. You don't get to ultimate liberty in one step. It's going to take actions that undermine and chip away and nullify the power of the government, which has been expanding for over a century. We're not going to turn that around in one step. So this letter from Jefferson to Madison, we know they wrote back and forth pretty regularly. There are countless letters in the library, in the archives, back and forth. So Madison took his advice and said, okay, I'm going to put together this resolution. And so he drafted his own resolutions for Virginia. The Virginia resolutions of 1798 declared the Alien and Sedition Acts unconstitutional, Mike Meharry wrote. Madison also asserted that the states had an obligation, and he put this in bold text, obligation, not just a good idea, obligation to act against egregious federal exercises of undelegated power. And that actually ended up in the resolution. And this is from the text of the resolution, and that I think it's a really important piece. And maybe this is really our quote of the day today. Madison wrote that in case of a deliberate, palpable, and dangerous exercise of other powers not granted by the said compact, that's the Constitution, the states who are parties to that compact or as he put, thereto, have the right and are in duty bound to interpose for arresting the progress of evil and for maintaining within their respective limits the authorities, rights, and liberties appertaining to them. James Madison told us that when the federal government does dangerous stuff, and basically everything they do these days is pretty dangerous. I mean, once in a while you'll find something positive. For example, I'm a big supporter of President Trump's move to withdraw from Syria so quickly out of nowhere. I didn't expect it to happen. And of course, the left and the right, and my friend Tom Woods did a podcast episode with Scott Horton about this. And I haven't listened to it yet, but I saw him tweeting about, at all these kind of peacenik lefties who are attacking Trump for being dangerous, for actually pulling out. For all these years, they've actually asked for less military presence in other countries, and now they're complaining when it actually happens. Well, anyways, other than that, almost everything the feds do is very dangerous. I talked about the new bump stock ban in the most recent episode on Monday. That ban, if we allow it to stand, if the states stand idly by, someone in the future is going to use that tactic of redefining what fits under the law to put other things. The Gun Owners of America put out an alert about this and how they expect it to be used by someone in the future to fully get rid of AR-15s, for example. So if you turn a blind eye, it's going to get worse. So it's not just a good idea to try to stop it when they exercise dangerous powers. As James Madison pointed out, the states are duty-bound to do it. They are duty-bound to arrest the progress, to stop the progress of the evil within their own borders. They can't be concerned about certainly we have to be concerned about encroaching evil from other areas. But they don't have it within their power. Someone in Virginia doesn't have it within their power to deal with what's going on in Georgia. They have to just try to make their own area look inward and make it as free as possible in light of the situation at hand. So it is their duty to do something about it. Not just a good idea, not after we wait a few years for a Supreme Court case, not after we wait till the next election, not after we organize a bunch of protests, but now, as soon as it happens, it's their duty. So going on, Mike points out that Madison took this draft of the Virginia resolutions, gave it to his friend Wilson Carey Nicholas, who then showed them to Thomas Jefferson, sent them back to Thomas Jefferson. And in a letter dated November 29, 1798, Jefferson actually not reconsidered that it was not a good idea, but he wanted Madison to take steps a little further. He wanted to not just call the acts unconstitutional. And he says, the more I've reflected on the phrase in the paper you showed me, the more strongly I think it should be altered. And he wanted to say, instead of calling on other people, other states to concur with the Virginia Commonwealth to consider these unconstitutional, but that to point out that, quote, the said acts are and were ab initio null, void, and of no force or effect. If you do that, I should like it better. Health and happiness and a Jew. It's a great letter from Thomas Jefferson. We linked that as well. So Wilson Carey Nicholas added those words and then handed them to his friend John Taylor of Caroline, who just celebrated a birthday. Dave Benner wrote a great overview of his life and contributions the other day that we published on the blog. So John Taylor of Caroline carried the resolutions for James Madison and included Nicholas's edition. It was introduced on December 10th, 1798. And he personally, John Taylor, described the resolutions, quote, as a rejection of the false choice between timidity and civil war. They want us to think, and we hear a lot of civil war talk today, and I think they want to drive us into that. They want us to drive us into a divide and conquer strategy. Either you have to go along with everything that they push on us, or eventually war is going to break out, the shooting's going to happen. We hear politicians talk about this. But no, that's a false choice. And nullification really is what the founders and what these great individuals considered the moderate middle ground. Jefferson really called it that as well. You don't have to only have a choice between one extreme or the other. You can resist, undermine, and nullify these acts on a state-by-state level without resulting in war or without resulting in unlimited submission. And Jefferson referred to it back in November of 1798 as an unlimited submission if you just comply. So in the course of the debate, Mike points out that Jefferson's suggested wording was pulled out. There were talks of war, and so the Virginia legislature was really concerned about this. They didn't want to encourage, and I know that in Kentucky they were talking about arming up in advance, so they were really trying to kind of walk this tight wire of taking a strong ground, taking a strong stand, but then avoiding kind of inciting a violent response because they weren't really ready for something like that. I think it was probably on the table for a lot of people, but the House of Delegates did not want to go that route. So they amended it out, but they still considered, although they didn't say null, void, and no force, they still referred to it as unconstitutional. And Mike points out that, quote, removing Jefferson's wording did not change the substance of the resolutions. In fact, declaring a law unconstitutional was essentially the same thing as calling it null, void, and of no effect. Because you can't be constitutional and have effect. It's really just the same phrase. So the Virginia House of Delegates passed the resolutions on December 21st, 1798, today in history, by a vote of 100 to 63. And then on Christmas Eve of that year, December 24th, 1798, the Senate concurred by a 14 to 3 margin. It did not need, because it's a resolution, it does not need the signature of the governor like what happened in Kentucky. I think the governor was just showing that he was on board. So Mike points out that taken together, the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions lay out the principles of nullification. That is, it's the duty of the states to stand up and resist federal overreach. Madison talked about this strategically as well in Federalist 46, talking about a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. Don't participate in federal acts that are either bad policy, according to your state, or unconstitutional, according to your state. Not waiting for everybody else to give you approval. Not waiting for a convention of 3/5 of the states to tell you you can do it. None of that. Just taking action in a single state to undermine, to take leadership and move things forward. And Mike also ends his article that pointing out that there was letters back and forth between Madison and Jefferson that really tell us that this was not the end point, these resolutions. This was intended to be a starting point. They wanted to use them as a springboard for state action against the unconstitutional Alien and Sedition Act. So again, we've got this linked in the show notes here on YouTube, over also at 10thamendmentcenter.com/Good Morning Liberty. I'm already thinking of a couple days vacation, so I apologize for the pause there. And then over in the chat as well, hi to JP Bocci, George McClellan, Justin Bayola, Gold Standard with Alan Mosley, Taco Salad. I appreciate you guys all being here with me today. Merry Christmas. And this is a fun, interesting kind of history lesson. Alan Mosley says, the Virginia Senate worked on Christmas Eve. Compare that to politicians today who barely show up on the floor at all, much less around holidays and vacations. And as an aside, Alan, I think you're going to agree with me. These days, because these politicians, something like this would not pass the Virginia legislature 100 to 63 or the Senate 14 to 3. There's no way. It probably wouldn't get out of committee in Virginia these days. This type of thing just gets no traction in a lot of states. And this is a non-binding resolution, a statement of principles, and I doubt you could move it forward. We've seen attempts like this in Texas from Senator Brandon Creighton for a number of years, and literally his Senate concurrent resolution 1, which was reintroduced again this year, after like it has been for the last 3-4 sessions, generally doesn't go anywhere. Although we do find other single-issue steps. But this kind of broad-reaching statement that the federal government, when they exercise powers not delegated to it, should be resisted by the states, this is not something that's going to pass. So I would like to point out that it's probably good that Virginia politicians skip out work as much as possible and don't show up around the holidays. We want less We want less interaction with these political types as much as possible these days. So I hope you found this interesting. I hope you have some really fun plans set up for Christmas, for this weekend. I'm going to go see some lights at the LA Zoo, spend some time with Sarah. I think we're going to see her cousin and her brother, cousin lives up near Santa Barbara. Brother is down in Huntington Beach, so I'm not sure. We might be a little bit on the road. So I hope you have some really fun plans coming up for Christmas. I will be back sometime next week. I'm not sure if it's going to be Wednesday, probably not till Friday. Awesome. Merry Christmas. I'm very grateful for everyone who spent the last basically 6 months since I started this show just after the 4th of July this summer. And so I've been running the show for about 6 months. I'm really enjoying doing it. I'm starting to expand into some new topics. We've got a lot of interesting things planned for the new year in 2019, and I'm looking forward to spending a lot of that time with you. Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, a very, very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you after the holiday. Thanks again for watching. Have a great